The reality is anyone in a service is in sales. A lot of dentists don't like to think of it like that, but they do need to convince the patient why this is going to make their life better.
Can you talk to us a little bit about, you touched on AI before. What are the early results telling you as far as services and processes and even case acceptance?
What we found, I think, overall is that...
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Office Hours for Practice Owners. I'm your host, Justin Marti with Marti Law Group, and I feel extremely fortunate today to welcome our guest, Ali Hyatt, Chief Customer and Growth Officer for Henry Schein One. For folks who don't know, if you're in the dental world, maybe you've been living under a rock. If you're not in the dental world, then I guess you have an excuse. But Henry Schein One is truly one of the, if not the largest technology platforms in our industry, with everything from practice management software, being Dentrix, which is his mild DSO, our 45 locations lived on Dentrix. It was the lifeline of the bloodline, if whatever the word is, of everything that we did. So Henry Schein One has the practice management side, imaging, patient revenue cycle management, you name it. They really have a product for any element of running the practice. And so it's really a pretty holistic company. And beyond that, Henry Schein does pretty much everything in the space. Ali has this incredible vantage point in her role to just see tens of thousands of practices and how they're doing what they do and compiling this data. So Ali, I could drone on for a while, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. I'm always interested in founders or executives and where the start was and then what you're doing now. So take us back to former Ali life and how we got to where we are.
Yeah, no, I'm so great to be here, Justin. Thanks for having me on today. Not too far for you over outside of Boston here.
That's right.
So yeah, as background, I won't go into the super long version, but I'm about 3.5 years into dental after spending about 7 years at a company called Amwell in telehealth. And so got to do the Go Telehealth during a pandemic in 2020, going public with them. So that was a lot of fun. So I have a lot of experience on the medical side. And then before that, did marketing, business development, product roles in startups, in larger companies like American Express and Avery Dennison, and then in consulting. So I think it's given me a really cool vantage point, to your point, about some of the similarities and differences between what we call medical and dental. And I always find it so funny because obviously dental is medical, right? It's in the mouth. And obviously this is a whole thing, like the mouth is connected to the rest of the body. What's been really interesting, I think, coming into this is at Henry Schein One, to your point, we have analytics, revenue cycle management, detect AI, so much in everything AI because everything is AI today. And what's really fun about it, though, is we do work across the whole spectrum of dental practices. So about 70,000 or so dental practices in the US that we touch overall. And you just get to see such big differences when you go into a private practice versus when you go into a DSO location. And so it's been a lot of fun. And I think the other thing that I am bringing from my past as I've come into Henry Schein One is a lot of that consumer focus. Dentists want to focus on the patient. That's what they care about, right? That's why they got into dental. They didn't go through a bunch of courses in dental school about running a business, running operations, learning how to do HR functions, but they're still expected to provide a really great consumer experience. No one really likes going to the dentist. So they also have that going against them. And so it's been really interesting. I run marketing, sales, onboarding, training, customer support, basically the functions that really touch customers. And so that's really where my focus is every day.
That's incredible. You just hit on the head. You're really seeing from initial onboarding through the patient experience and through the financial hurdles that we have to overcome as practice owners. I still say we sometimes. And
we're always going to be an owner. Yeah,
that's right. And, patient journey. So you truly touch all of that, and which is pretty profound. And recently, Henry Schein One released the Catalyst Index, which I find fascinating. And I'll let you speak to it a bit too. But really, this is from what I've read, it's truly a kind of a white paper almost that just gives us an overview of what's happening in the industry, again, across 70,000 practices. How's patient retention? How's financial concerns? How's all of it happening? Can you give us a little background on how this came about? How do you even start building something like the Catalyst Index?
So we work with thousands of practices in the US, but what we do for the report is take a look at 5,000 of those practices. So, a quantitative set of customers so we understand what's going on. And we basically connect it with our practice management data and then with our Dartmouth analytics to understand different components. And it's our 5th year doing it. We change it every year. And what we wanted to do this year was we basically broke it into 2. So it's the under 7 or under location look, and then the 8+ locations with a mid-size and larger DSOs to see the differences too. And I think that gives us a really interesting perspective, right? Because there are certain things that small practices actually do a lot better. And sometimes there are things that you don't expect, right? Of course, you expect a smaller practice to probably spend more time with a patient. That may or may not be true. And then with some of the larger practices, you obviously expect them to be able to understand scale and to be able to really execute at that much higher level. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes that's not. One of the key findings we found was you probably talk to different practices and think about what's going on in the macro industry every day, is that no-show rates and cancellation rates were down this year, which is great and good for practices. Nobody wants no-shows, but patient retention was also down. So it's an interesting thing where it's okay, you're not having people cancel as much, which is good, and you get to keep those slots, but yet at the same time, patients may be leaving. So the question is why, of course, and that's what we seek to do, is really understand, what's going on so that we can then use that data to help practices.
So that's a great point. It's almost, it's like an oxymoron here, right? We have patients are not canceling and patients are seemingly wanting to go forward, but yet the practice isn't retaining them. So was there something that were we able to put those pieces together, understand like why the disconnect?
Yeah, I think it's a number of different things. And again, it's like, what's the silver bullet really overall? What we found, I think, overall is that schedule reliability is really key. And what you're seeing is we like to look at the top 10% of practices, and then how does that compare to the average? So the top 10%, for example, are seeing a less than 1% no-show rate, which is great. The average is about 3%, which maybe doesn't sound so different, but obviously that makes a huge difference. Cancellation rates, similarly, like the top 10% are seeing below 1%. The average is about 5%. And what we found overall is it's things like standardized scheduling and confirmation workflows make a really big difference. So I just took my kids to the dentist myself, so I got to experience it firsthand. But getting that reminder at the right point in time, ensuring it's confirmed. Obviously, some dental offices call as well. It's having opportunities, say, for patients to be able to schedule how they want, online scheduling. A large percentage of patients or potential patients are actually looking for appointments in off hours when dental offices are closed. Obviously, many dental offices are closed many times of the day. So having that opportunity to provide those appointments and then ensuring that everyone at the office, either large DSO or small practice, has visibility into that. And that's where reporting can really help, right? You actually may find in looking at some simple reports that it's like, this time slot, people always cancel, right? So understanding those key data points can be really critical for that. And that, again, that's what often drives the patient retention issues, right? When you can't fulfill that consumer need they have to get an appointment at the right time that makes sense for them, or with the hygienist that they like to see, having that, like some practices have that available right online so you can see who you're scheduling with. Things like that make a really big difference.
And we touched on in the report, I saw a lot of operational consistency, which hit home, or the need for it. Like when we started with 1 or 2 practices, we were at the front desk, right? At first, we were answering the phones ourselves and then able to train folks. This is how we answer. This is how we schedule. This is the exact method we put in place. And then at scale, that's really hard to do, right? So we get 10 offices, 20 offices, and all of a sudden, like different front desks are doing different things and confirmations are different. And even the chart handoff can feel really different. And so one of the things I obviously picked up looking through the report and just anecdotally is at scale, it can be really hard to keep those SOPs basically in place. So it seems like that kind of came through in the report. And I don't know how you coach practices around that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think comes down to a number of things. On the clinical side, it's really important that the clinical leadership is driving this and understanding where they can bring in technology to help with that too. There were a couple of practices I was in recently, and they were talking about how the leadership, they was talking about how when they used to introduce technology, it was like this mess of technology overall. I don't want to deal with it, right? I don't want to deal with it overall. But when you tie it to like how it makes their life easier, then that makes a big difference where they can really see, oh, I don't have to spend all my time on this annoying phone call with the insurance company. Things like that make a big difference. We recently introduced a product called Image Verify through Dentrix Ascend and Dentrix, and it has a 5-star rating on an image. And you might think, oh, people don't want to be like measured on their image and like, how good is it? They're like, went to school to learn how to take an x-ray overall. But what it's doing is actually just telling you what to do with the image to make it more likely to go through insurance, right? So you get paid for the actual service you did. So it tells you if part of the image got clipped off or the tooth that you're submitting the claim for is actually not even shown or it's blurry. It's things like that that really help drive consistency. So that essentially helps teach and educate the clinician, the dental assistant, to know what they have to do in order to help the practice or DSO scale and get paid for the service they provided. So it's things like that that can make a really big difference.
It's huge. And as for any practice owner who's listening, and we have a lot of emerging DSOs, I'd say, as our clientele, 2, 3, 4 locations, some north of that 8 mark you mentioned. And I'm sure it hits home because the difference between 95% collection rate and 98% collection rate is huge. Again, we lived it, having at one point a pretty poor collection rate. And to know in advance of the whole time you spend submitting to insurances and doing all this work, we're going to get paid for it. It sounds like something like the imaging technology is just a game changer.
Yeah, and I think it's like that size you talked about, that emerging, the like 2 to 5 to 7 or so, is like a really critical inflection point, right? Where you're focusing on like your vision and your roots of providing good clinical care to patients, but you're also trying to grow. And like doing all that at the same time is hard because you're not sure like where you should focus for efficiency too. So it is like finding those points of focus that can be really key. And I think the things like the Image Verify make a big deal. Things like just making it easy for patients to pay bills, right? We're all used to being able to pay a bill via a text or an email, but we know there's still many practices out there that are sending paper, right? That get lost in the mail or patient just forgets to follow up on it. If you can make it really easy, just at the point of checkout, when you're scheduling that appointment, to just send them the text to pay right there and they do it. Things like that really make a big difference to tie together the experience.
That's awesome. One of like, there were kind of like these core tenets, I feel like, of the report. And one of the things that really stuck with me is patients don't reject treatment. They delay what they don't understand. Yeah. I found this fascinating. I actually used to, in a former life, my first dental role was with Capital One Healthcare Finance, which was like a Care Credit competitor. I don't think it exists anymore, that division, but truly it was Care Credit. And that's how I met my eventual partners, and it was just coaching their teams on how to sell treatment and how to increase case acceptance using obviously patient financing as a tool. So can you unpack that idea of they don't really reject it, but they're like putting it off almost?
Yeah, I know. I love that idea too. It's like the note was like, care doesn't break during the visit, it breaks afterwards, which is so true. The patient, it makes sense. The dentist presents it. Maybe they use AI and they literally show on screen, oh, this was you a year ago, the tooth. Here's what it looks like now. Because we all know that AI is really about a second opinion. It helps the dentist build that credibility. I'm saying it, I'm an expert. But you know what? You can also just look at the images here and see what's happened within the year. But then what happens is exactly what you said. They're unsure of how much it's going to cost, which is just the unfortunate reality of dentistry and why the revenue cycle management part of it is so important. Or they don't get scheduled right then. And then, of course, they go on and get busy with their life and don't think about those things. So it is really about those key points, right? Make sure the appointment is in place before the patient even leaves the chair. And I know my own dentist does that, right? Like you're waiting to see the dentist to check you out during a recare visit. and the dental assistant gets it scheduled right when you're there. So there's nothing you can say no to. Understanding options, things like care credit or other patient financing, so you know what it is. We do eligibility verification, and understanding like what the patient is already covered for. That stuff is so important because literally people at the front desk are spending like 12 hours a day calling insurance companies, right? They could be spending that doing much more beneficial things, much more patient focused things that also then help the doctor. So it's things like that, just almost like operationally like check off every point at which you could lose the patient. And it's no different from really any other service, right? Where there's always the ability for the patient or the consumer to walk away and be like, and just forget about it, making it so that you have checked each box in terms of how much do I pay? Is it scheduled? What's the visit going to look like? So education to understand that, everything along the way.
Yeah, and the Catalyst Index talked about this delta of some practices are at a 45% acceptance rate and some are at 75%. And so is it truly like implementation in your mind of all of these things we're talking about to get the patient to accept in the chair, relieve the financial concern, there's always the fear of the drill, right? We try to leave that, but then get everything out of the way so that friction is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all those things for sure. To your point, I was just in a couple visits recently to different customers. One was a larger office, and one of the guys that leads the operations there was actually showing us how they bring patients often they have a little conference room and they have the TV up and they walk them through it. Obviously, that goes a long way towards making the patient be able to go forward and feel confident in the treatment. And maybe that takes them 5 to 10 extra minutes, but it goes a long way. And then I've also I got to visit a new office that opened like a year and a half ago in Chicago. And again, it was like all about educating the patient. I, as the dentist, might be saying some words that you don't really understand. I'm going to walk you through it so you really understand what we're doing and what we're going to do procedure-wise. That really makes a big difference.
Can you talk to us a little bit about, you touched on kind of AI before, right? And AI is it's going to be the term of the year, the acronym of the year. Everything, right? It's changing so quickly, and it's even the legal world, right? Legal services usage way down. And so we look at ways as how do we leverage AI to do better and be quicker and be more thorough. Obviously, being at the helm of this tech monster, how are you, or how is the organization implementing AI? What are some of those tools, and what are the early results telling you as far as services and processes and even case acceptance?
Yeah. And we try to live it ourselves. Right? We use Claude with Anthropic, and everyone's used to doing it by this point. I think what we're seeing is there's a number of different things. One is things like the second opinion I talked about, that AI is really useful for that. The reality is anyone in a service is in sales. A lot of dentists don't like to think of it like that, but they do need to convince the patient like why this is going to make their life better, improve their overall health. And so it can be really useful for that. It also, we have voice notes out, and that we've seen to be really important in no dentist, no medical doctor, no anyone wants to sit there and take a bunch of notes. And they especially don't want to do it after they might have seen a bunch of patients in a row, and then they're trying to get back to and remember everything that they talked about. It can be honestly damaging overall. And with voice notes, it's ambient voice notes, it's listening to you, it's putting it into the template for you for claims purposes, for medical notes purposes. So it's all there and takes the context too, right? Like it's not building in the fact that you asked the patient about their daughter's graduation into it, right? It's taking all that context. And I think that's been really key to improving quality of life overall. And then I think probably the third key area we see it is at the front desk, right? With scheduling agents, appointment confirmations, understanding context when a potential patient calls in to make sure that's followed up on. Because again, a lot of the calls that come in are in off hours as well. And so that I think it's like taking the mundane stuff away. You need the people. The people are so important. That human element is so important, but they don't need to be doing the mundane tasks all day long.
Reminded me of like when we had our practices, like chasing doctors for chart notes was like one of the most painful things. And I'm like, Justin, I'm hopping from room to room and I've got to sit down and try to remember. I think that is Simple idea, but such a huge time save and something that every practice should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like just trying it out, right? It's like you're gonna find, okay, oh, looks like I need to make sure I have the microphone here. It feels a little awkward at first, right? To say stuff out loud and, have the voice notes pick it up, but then the doctor gets used to it, the clinical staff gets used to it, and then it just becomes part of the flow, right? Because otherwise they're sitting there typing into their notes and not really looking at the patient anyway.
Do you see certain practices underestimating the importance of, not that we're in denial, but there's this element of, hey, AI is here, right? And I don't think we'll have robots doing implants soon, but just the overall importance of layering these tools on. And maybe it's layering a Henry Schein tool on, but that has the AI built in. You just see practices, unfortunately, just making some repeated mistakes.
Yeah, I do. And I get it, right? Because there is everyone has the questions about it, right? And it's not like people are like, I want AI to take over and for people not to think. But one of the key places I've seen it is actually with our customer support. So we rolled out AI across all of it, and we still have many real humans taking calls as well. But we've actually found that oftentimes, because the AI agents are taking in thousands of articles of where a customer asked a question, wanted to know how to do this type of report, the AI agents can actually take all of that data really quickly and then create context for it. And so answer it in a much better way sometimes than a human that, there's a lot of different products. There's a lot of different use cases for things where they're in a way searching for stuff. So there are many places in which those humans are absolutely needed, right? For providing that higher level of support, consulting, implementation, certainly things like legal services. But for taking thousands of things that have happened in the past and bringing that all together, AI can be really useful for quickly getting a lot of information in a simple way, and also understanding emotion too, right? Like this person is calling in and they're very stressed out because they can't close the day because of this, versus, they're just thinking about potentially using AI in this way. So understanding that emotion is really helpful and key. And AI can help take that data. It's not going to replace all of us, don't worry, but it is helpful for that purpose.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's the kind of a double-edged sword, and it's helped so many things, even small, mundane tasks for our organization, right? Operationally, there's this fear lawyers aren't going to be needed. Dentists don't have that same fear to that extent, but a lot of people are concerned. But I do think the groups that leverage the right tools with AI, I think last, right? And will be stronger for it.
Exactly. It's all about leveraging it as a tool, really, right? Like, how do we use it to make our lives better, make our work better, so that we're focusing on the things that matter to us, which for dentists and the clinical staff is really on the patients.
For our practice owners and having been, again, even as a firm owner, we are managing so much all the time. For whatever reason, we were drawn to this entrepreneurial life, right? Like you have that entrepreneurial bug in you from past startup world, and we love it. I complain all day, right? My poor wife, but meanwhile, I love it. But you're managing staffing pressure, operational changes, for the practices that are the emerging DSO, what should they be focusing most on right now, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. We like to talk about and I know I've talked about a little bit throughout this, but clinical driving growth, because it takes what the dentist wants to do, which is focus on the patients and why they opened a practice in the first place, but then connects it to how do they grow as a practice. So I think especially as an emerging DSO, that's where you want to focus. So it's understanding the 2 to 3 key opportunities that can help you go where you need to go. So for example, a lot of practices are using Curodont to treat caries and lesions, and they may show up as a potential caries on an x-ray, and then they may treat it in office with Curodont, and patients are really happy because they don't have to get drilled, and they go home and feel like, oh, this is a good new experience I had. It may be that for another practice, schedule was the problem, right? They're like, I have all these holes in the schedule. I can't seem to line up the right, whether they have an associate or do they have enough hygienists, and it feels like that. And so for them, it may be really focusing on the schedule and using reports on dashboards through technology tools to figure that out, I think is really key. We introduced this thing that sounds really crazy, and it's what is this? But it's called the MCP layer. And what it really means is through you're using Dentrix Ascend as your practice management software, and you can ask it, hey, where should I focus this week to increase my production by 10%? And it will go through the data and tell you where you should focus. So that's in early stages in beta with some customers. But that, I think, is really the future, is figuring out those small things that could make a big difference, because you can't do everything at once.
Yeah, if you roll out the MCP for law firms, I'm happy to sign up, because that's absolutely a brilliant product. But this is probably a loaded question, but is the suite of Henry Schein One products, are they intentionally a one-stop shop that I can get Dentrix and get the imaging software and really they talk to each other much more seamlessly than I'm piecing different pieces of software together?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think this is where it's like we just try to listen to our customers every day. And if anyone who's listening on those Facebook groups, we all read them every day. And we're like, oh, look at this person said, like, how can we solve this problem? We really do listen. Yeah, we do, because we think if you're a dentist running a practice or you're at the front desk, like, you want it to be as seamless as possible. You don't want to be going to a million different solutions. Now, at the same time, like, we're an open platform. So we have, I think, 175 different partners that integrate right into Dentrix Ascend and Dentrix. So we are very happy to support a practice or DSO who wants to use outside partners and securely integrate, because that's important. You don't want to take down your whole system. But yeah, we're trying to build like what customers want. So if it's like, hey, the thing that's really important is this AI capability or this analytics capability, we are going to focus on building that, because that's what's important to customers, to make it seamless so that, yeah, they're not going through a million different windows and clicking tabs and things like that to do what they need to do.
Yeah, I guess it's like full circle to where we started, is that idea of everything does start with that clinical moment, as you say, and the integrated workflows will result in, as I look back on our organization, our DSO, I'm like, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, because it would have truly helped make a smoother operation, a more successful operation. Again, we were fortunate to have done well, great market timing, a lot of luck, but there are certainly elements that could have ratcheted up a little bit the customer experience, the overall revenue, the EBITDA for those folks who are going on transaction.
Yeah. What's the biggest thing that you see now that you wish you had when you were doing that?
Oh my goodness. Obviously AI and what we're seeing with scheduling. I think rev cycle management, the tools that have emerged, just huge, because as we would have a front desk person, initially was myself, right? Sitting in an office, calling insurances all day, when I have the doctors like, Justin, why didn't I get paid for this fillings I did?
What happened? Yeah.
So those tools, I think, are fascinating to me, and just anything that can really increase the patient experience and make it a more fluid, comfortable experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's again, no one wants to be doing that, right? Like, it's like I've seen people go through spreadsheets and then it's like they never get to the bottom and then they have to go back to the top again. And the insurance companies don't make it easy, right? So there's no reason that someone has to be doing that. And again, I still go into practices and see that. And it's like, you don't have to be doing that. You could just have it automatically come in. And it's things like that. Just make things easier. It makes sense to try them and see how they work.
Is that a big part of what, are you're going out into the field and having these one-on-one discussions pretty regularly with clients or potential clients?
Yeah, it's so important. Like I'll try to do it whenever I can in any way. This week went into pretty good size, like 2 locations, a lot of operatories. And it's every time I go in, I learn something new, or I observe and see the front office staff doing something, and we might be really excited about some new product, right? We're like, oh, this thing's going to really change revenue cycle management. And then I go on and I watch, and it's like, they didn't notice that it was like this box in the right telling them to do that. And they didn't notice it because they're super busy doing something else. And so like getting those insights is just so important. And I know we probably get the reputation because we're big as the leader in dental software overall, but it's like, no, we are so committed to listening. The whole leadership team is making sure that like we don't go a day without talking to customers, because you just learn so much, especially from seeing someone's busy day. And of course they don't have time to focus on that. Of course they don't have an hour to get trained on this. You better make it really easy, so the second it comes out, it's usable and making an impact on them.
That's amazing. I think of the chief customer and growth officer kind of making rounds and identifying pain points is, I feel like, a pretty unique situation. And so it's great. You're in the field. I recall secret shopping our own locations and calling from the parking lot. And they're, Justin, we know it's you, but that's a nice try. So I think you getting out there to thousands of practices probably makes a big difference.
Yeah, I remember listening to a dental, like a private practice podcast a couple years ago when I first joined into dental. And they were talking about how a consultant, did secret shopping, secret calling, right? Where they called and they're like, oh, I'm a mom. I'd like to bring in my 2 kids. I only have this time available. And all the practices that were like, sorry, we don't have those times. And it was just potential patient lost.
Gone.
When like all they had to do was either open for a couple hours on a different day or just change their schedule for one day of the week, whatever it might be. But you get so much, from doing that secret shopping or getting to observe overall.
That's incredible. Your insight is amazing. And obviously the Catalyst Index, I think for any practices out there, like you said, whether you're 1 location or you're 8+, is a wealth of information. Again, there's these key tenets that they're important, I think, for practice owners, really business owners of any kind, but certainly practice owners to focus on. If you could tell us like where folks would go to either learn more just about Henry Schein One and your software products or the index in particular, and we'll of course put it in the show notes, but if you could direct people to that place.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely go to henryschein1.com or dentrixascend.com, and you can access all of it, learn about all the solutions. And I think you can find the Catalyst report there. And I think what's really helpful about it, whether you're 1 location, whether you're 20, whether you're 50, is what we found last year is that a lot of people were asking questions about the definitions of things because they really wanted to compare themselves to others. And so we made that really clear in the reports too. So I hope people find that useful too, so they can be like, oh, okay, they do measure treatment acceptance the same way that I do. Okay, here's how I should think about it. But we'd love to share it. You can access it free just on the site and tell us what you think, what you want to hear about for next year too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Thrive Live, it sounds like was a pretty cool event, and that's an annual event for Schein. So I think we'll track you down. I'll be trying to track you down next year for that, and we'll talk all the changes in AI and new products that are out. But I really appreciate the time. You're obviously a busy individual, and this is really cool for a lot of our practice owners to understand this data is out there, use it and learn from it. And there's tools out there that can help you. It can be overwhelming sometimes with the number of tools, but I think by really focusing on that patient experience first and let's work backwards, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great being with you, Justin. And for any practice, DSO, et cetera, we always love to hear from people. What's working for you? What's not working? What are you like? If someone could build this in technology, it would really make my life easier. So always love to hear from people about what's on their minds. So thanks so much for having me.
Amazing, Ali. Thank you so much.